Could you please just introduce yourself real quick?
My name is,
So, can I just have your name and then your title and then company you work for?
sure. My name is Keith Dabbs. I'm the Director of Supply Chain Management at Chesapeake Regional Healthcare in Chesapeake, Virginia.
And so, how many people do you manage at your position and what kind of work do they do?
Currently, I have two managerial direct reports, but a total of 19 people that report up to me. And typically, these roles are in purchasing, inventory distribution, receiving, mailroom, and couriers.
And then, if it isn't already obvious, what's the connection between us?
Well, Will is my son. Will is my hokey son.
All right. So, um, in your managerial position, how often do you meet with your employees to talk about their performance?
Well, I've worked at a number of different healthcare organizations, and forever it's always been an annual evaluation review, performance evaluation review. And typically that's where, depending on the organization and their type of evaluation system that they use in the human resources, is typically a performance-based evaluation where you rate them, for example, 1 to 5, 1 being poor, 5 being excellent. And then from there, based on the attributes that HR is looking for in terms of, customer satisfaction, how well do they do their job, how willing are they, how dedicated are they, those types of attributes. There they get an average score, and then their merit-based pay is determined there and then added to their current hourly salary. Now that is, I've been in a number of conferences where I think a lot of companies don't even do these evaluation surveys anymore, or competency-based surveys. But I know healthcare is still very much part of that, using that process, and maybe not so much information technology type roles or jobs, but but during the year, it's very important, no matter how large your team is to stay in touch with them. And I'm a firm believer of giving praise and criticism in a brief amount of time. There's a famous book called The 1 Minute Manager, and I subscribe to that theory. And I like to give, if someone deserves a commendation or an attaboy, I like to do that immediately and let them know that whether I observed them doing something good or someone told me they were doing something good and they were observed, I immediately like to share that with employee. And likewise, if it was something to the opposite, something negative or unproductive, I'd share that in a brief amount of time. And I think you have to know your employees. It's very important. I have a small team. I've had over 100 people before, and I like to know their names. I like to know what interests they have, because that all plays in how I handle them individually when it comes to praise or criticism or disciplinary action, if that's the case. So I think if you have a grasp of your employee, you don't have to be best friends, and you certainly don't want to be adversaries. You have to know how they react in certain situations. Some people absolutely do not want to be in the public eye, even if it was for a major praise. If you do those types of things to an employee who's not comfortable with that, it can be counterproductive in your relationship. They may lose some trust in you, or feel that you don't know them, and you side them, even if it's for something very positive. It can work against you. So you have to know your team very well. And again, my personal preference is informal, constant. How you doing? Hey, I need to talk to you about this. And if it's an unproductive employee, that usually, it requires maybe I sit down in my office type situation where you have to go over a corrective action, or deal with something that's negative. And so that's usually going to obviously take more time. But to answer your question, yes, it's an annual competency-based evaluation in our health system at Chesapeake, And during the year, basically, it's more informal for me.
Hmm. So you would say that you're much more of a fan of the informal kind of meetings than the formal, but the formal is still very much present in your job.
Yes, I established myself anywhere I've worked as a manager, and I say the same thing. I'm going to be friendly, I'm going to be fair, and I'm going to be firm. And I always make that statement the first day, whenever I've started a job, and I tell them I use the same example, and that is we could talk about the game last night, we can talk about your kids, or I need to speak to you in my office.
Hmm.
And that's that the employees, they need to know what's expected of them, and that shows them respect. If they have clear expectations and they're held accountable, they react in kind.
And so for your more informal kind of meetings, what does the documentation look like? Do you like to take notes or do you like to just keep it in your head
Yeah.
or is there any kind of documentation system you have for those?
Well, there's an adage in managing people when you're dealing with your human resources department, and that is document, document, document. So I typically use the document, document, document in a negative, since if there's an underperforming employee or something negative or undermining or um, um, counterproductive, then I like to use emails for those handwritten notes that I'll scan into a file and share with HR, confidential emails about the situation, because you need documents to support your cause in case this goes into a corrective action or even termination event. But
Hmm.
for positive, informal, it's definitely that's just what I use. It's if it's a situation where someone really did something really good, hey, we may bring the executives in on a meeting, or send out an email blast to the hospital. It just depends on how noteworthy it is. But
Hmm.
if I just observe somebody, picking up a piece of trash out of the hallway, I'm going to say, hey, that was really cool. I appreciate you doing that. That just as an example. But I tend to be more informal, but I can be very formal if I need to be.
Hmm. And so when you're dealing with underperformers, what's it like for you? What's the process like to help them bring up their performance? And would you say that is probably the hardest part of your job?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it's probably the hardest part of the job because I'm a firm believer of managing people up, and if they can't be managed up, I manage them out. And some would say that sounds harsh, but I've been a leader of people for almost 30 years now, and I've seen all types in different regions of the country. And sometimes it's just you just know when you have an employee that's it's not going to turn around. Now, having said that, I have been in situations where I was able to meet with the employee, and we come to terms, and things turn around. But that's a very small percentage of the time. So underperformers, I like to work with their immediate managers and supervisors to see what we can do, and try to utilize human resource the human resources department as a resource until they can also see that we're fighting an uphill battle, and then that just helps the situation of managing a person out, makes that situation easier because now it's not just my call or my call and my supervisors, but HR can see it as well. So the underperformers, sometimes it's hard to turn them around, but that all comes back to hiring, and that's trying to hire the right individual because I'm a team oriented, customer service oriented leader, and that's what we have to have: teamwork and customer service, great and customer satisfaction. So making the right hire is it's a roll of the dice, but if you interview well, you make people want to come work for you.
Mhm. And then finally, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job?
Um, most rewarding part for me in healthcare supply chain is just leaving at the end of the day knowing that we've placed the orders that we need to place for the day. We've received items that we needed for the day to make sure we can take care of the patients, and just knowing that the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule, that what we've done is pretty much encapsulated taking care of our patient base for that day. You never know what's going to come in at night to the emergency room, and we'll deal with that the next day or even in the middle of the night. Just today, actually, I had to go to CVS pharmacy to get an item that was immediately needed for a patient, and it was a rather simple item, but it was just something that wasn't carried in the storeroom. And I took great pleasure and pride knowing that I ran to CVS, grabbed something, and take it back to the hospital to make this patient stay better. So I personally, I just like to see the team perform well. Have and I base everything on how satisfied our customers are, and our customers are our patients, the caregivers, the clinicians, other support departments in the hospital, our suppliers. Those are all our customers. And if I'm not getting negative feedback from them, that's a great day. So my barometer is customer satisfaction. Are we getting lots of calls and complaints? Then I've got problems. But to answer your question, just knowing that we're taking care and being good financial stewards of our inventory, of our official asset inventory, we're making wise decisions on what we buy and who we buy it from. We take advantage of our group purchasing organization relationship and other major relationships we have with our suppliers to make sure that we're getting good contracts so we can save money and help reduce patient care costs. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's taking care of our customers.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you. So thank you for the interview.
It's been a pleasure, Will. Go Hokies.